sister accused me of stealing money from our father's safe, but later I discovered she was secretly funding her boyfriend's gambling addiction, and tried to frame me because she knew Dad would cut her off completely if he ever found out. I was 20 when all of this debacle began. But if I'm honest, the cracks in my family had already been present long before that. My father's name is Halden, and I grew up in a small town in Indiana with him, who's 58, and with my sister, Riona, who's 24. Our mother, June, passed away from breast cancer when I was 12, so it was just the three of us in the house after that. Dad worked at a local parts factory as a machinist, and is one of those keep your head down and work hard kind of men. He never really bounced back from Mom's passing, although he tried as hard as he could to keep everything going okay for us, and by and large succeeded. But when you lose the binder that holds the family together, cracks begin to form, and I think that's what we went through. Riona was always the golden child. She was beautiful, totally confident, and that sort of girl who always had an entourage of people following in her wake. Teachers loved her, boys idolized her, and Dad sort of put her on a pedestal. I wasn't resentful exactly, but I did feel that I existed in her shadow. I was the more reserved, bookish sort of kid and never drew much attention to myself. By the time I was 20 years old, I was still living at home, working part-time at a bookstore and trying to figure out if college was even an option for me or not. Riona, on the other hand, was going to and flunking out of community college, never actually finishing anything, and was dating this guy named Corin, who was 26 and honestly made me really uncomfortable from the moment I met him. He was suave, too smooth, the kind who shook your hand but looked into your eyes a split fraction of time too long, as though examining you. Dad never quite liked him either, but since Riona adored him, he kept his peace. It started with things going missing. Dad maintained that old safe in his bedroom closet, not for anything fancy, just for his money, some documents, and reminders of Mom's. He did not completely trust banks, old tendencies from his own boyhood, I guess, and so he kept some money in cash reserves. Late one night, after dinner, he spoke with me in private, looking pale, explaining that he was short almost $3,000. He asked me, in this quivering voice I never heard him use before, if I'd taken it, and when I said no, I could feel this strange chill in the air, because I knew from the look in his eyes that he wasn't sure if he was going to believe me. A couple of days later, Riona cornered me in the kitchen, arms folded, and accused me outright. She said she saw me snooping around Dad's closet. That wasn't it. I never even went near his safe. I remember my jaw just hanging in horror, my mouth opening and closing like I couldn't even form words. She spun it further, yelling that I was always the needy one, and maybe that I thought I needed it because I never got the same sort of attention that she did. The worst was, Dad heard some of it, and his silence was deafening. He didn't defend me, didn't stop it, just sat there with this expression on his face like he was deciding if I could do something like that. That broke me. Weeks became days, and the tension in the house was killing me. Dad was cold, distant, like he didn't know how to talk to me. Riona was being judgmental, tossing in little salvos about responsibility and trust. I found myself second-guessing, wondering if perhaps I had done something I couldn't remember, though I was certain that wasn't it. I could hardly afford gas and an odd fast food supper. What on earth would I do with $3,000? But then tiny pieces started to fall into place. Riona's boyfriend Corin now had a new leather jacket on, flashy and expensive looking. They were going out more frequently, dining in restaurants, and once I had overheard her on the phone panting hysterically about covering losses and having to get more cash. I did not connect the dots immediately, but slowly it came home to me. She was giving him money, and because I knew Corin, it wasn't for rent or bills. Gambling. I had watched him once at the small casino on the edge of town, grinning with a group of men at the poker tables, a beer in his hand. My stomach twisted up. It would destroy her if Dad ever knew. He had always told me that he couldn't stand individuals who wasted their lives on alcohol. His own brother had wasted his life on booze and died too soon. Riona knew that too, which meant she wasn't stealing but rather staging me out, attempting to place herself in the clear while placing the blame on me, and seeing it this way made me sick. I needed to push back against her, to scream and demand she get the truth out to Dad, but I was restrained. If I kept pushing where there was no evidence, I'd be sounding crazy, maybe even guilty. So I started watching, listening, documenting what she did. I'd hear her slip out at night, see her come back with red eyes due to crying, occasionally with Corin shadowing her with a scowl on his face. The moment I witnessed her opening Dad's safe with his spare key, I had no idea she owned one though. My heart was pounding so hard, I believed I was going to pass out, but I never spoke up then. I merely stood stock still in the hallway, hidden, as she pulled out a bundle of money and shoved it into her bag like it was nothing. That's when it really hit me. She was going to suck Dad dry of all his cash, and if I didn't say anything, she'd take the blame off me. I didn't sleep the night that I saw Riona stuff the money into her bag, I just lay in bed, stuck to the ceiling, my chest sore, going over and over in my mind, what do I do now? I was 20 again, still discovering who I was myself. And now suddenly I was in the midst of this dangerous game that my sister and her addict boyfriend were playing. I wanted to tell Dad right away, burst into his bedroom, wake him up, and tell him about what I had seen. But I held back because I knew how much as he wished he could believe in her. To him, Riona was always still the golden child, the one he thought could do no harm, the daughter he silently counted on to assist in filling the void Mom left. And I was the quiet one, the one who got lost in the shadows. If I accused her without evidence, he'd look at me with the same heavy suspicion in his eyes, the same one that had already made me feel like a stranger in my own home. At breakfast the following morning, I watched her intently. She bubbled, almost too bubbly, humming as she spread butter on toast, asking Dad about work like she hadn't just stolen money from him hours before. Dad seemed relieved by her temperament, smiling back at her, even laughing when she teased him for having forgotten to purchase orange juice. I was invisible, sitting there with my plate still untouched, wanting to scream but keeping it inside. Later that afternoon, while Dad was working and Riona had left, I searched through her room. I know it was bad, but by then I did not have another choice. Her closet was filled with clothes, purses, and shoe boxes I knew she was not able to afford. Concealed in her top drawer was an envelope containing cash, most likely what she had not yet contributed to Corin. And underneath that, buried amongst some old notebooks, was the crumpled up casino receipt just outside town. It was a poker buy-in, only a week ago. My stomach churned. There it was, evidence, but I just froze, because how could I show it to Dad without confessing to going through her things? And what if she figured out I had seen it? She'd flip it back on me. I was certain she would. She was always better at telling lies, always had this knack for portraying herself as the victim, and me stumbling over my words, sounding guilty even when I wasn't. That evening, Riona came home late. I was awake on the couch, pretending to be watching the television, when she snuck in. Her eyes had widened at seeing me, then become narrowed in suspicion. "What are you doing up?" she barked, her voice curt, as if she were already wound tight. "Just couldn't sleep," I muttered gruffly. She made her way past me to the kitchen, but something in her stance, the way she had cinched her purse around her like a shield, told me for certain that she had more money she'd stolen from Dad. My heart pounded but I said nothing. A couple of days passed like that, me quietly observing, her conducting her usual business, and Dad unknowingly in limbo between us, annoyed and irate with me but refusing to confront her too. Until one Sunday afternoon, everything boiled over. Dad called both of us into the sitting room. He was pale, emaciated, and gripped his safe key in his trembling hand. "I owe another 2,000, he snarled, low but shaking with barely controlled rage. "And I want to know what's going on." My throat closed. I wanted to scream it out, tell him it was her, that she was emptying his savings account to its final cent. But before I had a chance to make a sound, Riona jumped up, wide-eyed with fake indignation, and accused me. "It's her, Dad! I caught her sneaking around your closet again." My head snapped in her direction, mouth open. "That is not true!" I screamed, my voice shaking. "I would never." But she cut me off. She launched into this whole story about how I was jealous for years, how I was constantly broke and bitter, and clinging to being seen. She was actually crying with tears filling up in her eyes, and I swear, she deserved an award at that point for being so convincing. Dad stared at me with this broken expression, and it was as if my whole world was cracking apart. I tried to shield myself, mumbling something about Corin, about money she suddenly had, about the casino slip I'd found, but she dramatically gasped, cutting me off, swearing that I was lying, that I'd left it in her room to get her into trouble. I have never felt smaller, more powerless. The man who'd raised me, the man I trusted more than anyone else, just sat there quietly, stuck in the middle of his daughters, and I could see in his eyes that he was leaning towards believing her. I ached to yell, to rip open her purse at that moment, and show him the money that I knew she always kept on hand. But I didn't. Something within me held me back. Maybe fear, maybe exhaustion from always being the one no one heard. That night, I locked myself in my bedroom and cried harder than I had in years. The next day, I knew I couldn't go on like this, suffocating in her lies. I wanted hard proof, something she couldn't spin or rationalize away. So I started to tail her. Not all Hollywood and overblown, just off the wall observing where she went, what time she left, and how long she was out. One evening on Thursday, she told me that she was studying at some friend's home, but I knew the truth. I waited for half an hour, and then snuck out, and followed her car to town. My palms were sweating so much over the steering wheel that I thought of turning back, but I clenched my jaws and moved forward. As expected, she didn't go to anybody's home. She headed straight to the casino. I stayed far away, my heart racing, and observed as she met Corin at the parking lot. He seemed agitated, upset, pacing as she fished money from her purse and thrust it into his hands. He kissed her hastily, but this kiss wasn't one of love, it was desperate, as if he needed her just to survive. My stomach churned as I realized the truth. She wasn't just helping him to gamble, she was his helper, his enabler, and she'd let me burn for it. Undefined, that was when I realized that I had to do something. Undefined, I couldn't just sit around and let my sister destroy our father's trust in me while milking him dry for a man who was drowning in his own addiction. The drive home from the casino that night was one of the longest of my life, though it lasted only 30 minutes. My hands shook on the steering wheel, and my mind ran wild with 1,000 questions. I had seen it myself. My sister taking money out of Dad's safe and handing it over to Corin like it was no big thing. No more wondering if perhaps I was paranoid or perhaps I was mistaken. It was real, and it was occurring. But the bigger question weighed on me. How do I show him it's true before she turns it all around on me again? She was too good at spinning the story, too good at manipulating him, and honestly, I was scared of what she would do if she felt cornered. I was a 20-year-old kid, getting through my working hours in the bookstore and scrambling to keep my head above water, and all of a sudden I was having to play detective on my own family. The next morning, I couldn't even look at her the same way. She strode into the kitchen like nothing had ever happened, hair done, wearing one of her new pairs of boots I knew she couldn't possibly pay for. "Good morning," she sang, pouring coffee cups like she hadn't just got me busted for stealing thousands from our dad. I gazed at her, my stomach in knots, and for the shortest instant I worried that she felt even a hint of guilt. If she did, she concealed it masterfully, because all I saw was confidence, maybe even smugness. Dad, of course, was not privy. He sat there, sipping coffee, reading the paper, exhausted but still grasping for hope that maybe this was all a confusion. Seeing them together made me feel like a foreigner in my own home, like I was yelling into silence no one could hear. When Riona left to class again that evening, this flame was lit in me. I used my ancient phone. It wasn't one of the high-capacity devices, but it did have a decent camera, and followed her car, far enough back that she would not notice me. My hands sweated so much I had to wipe them on my leg, but I psyched myself up and pushed on. Sure enough, she drove right back to the casino. I parked nearly in the same location as previously and waited, my heart racing against my chest. I fired everything this time. I zoomed in as I could and captured her greeting Corin at the parking lot. What the recording revealed was that she pulled out some money from her purse, handed it over to him kissing her in haste, and both of them entering the building hand in hand. It wasn't clear-cut, the lighting was awful, and the zooming made it grainy, but it was sufficient to show her and Corin together, exchanging money in a casino parking lot. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped the phone. During the drive back home, I felt this wacky mix of relief and terror. Relief that I finally possessed something concrete. Terror that to show it to Dad would blow apart our entire family. That night, lying awake, I played the video over and over again. I imagined Dad's expression when he saw it, imagined him being disillusioned with her, furious at being lied to. Then I thought of Riona's face, how she would make everyone spin it around, even make me lie about having edited it or made it up somehow. I didn't want to be disrespected. She was smart, a master manipulator, and when cornered, she fought with everything in her. I vowed to show Dad tomorrow morning, but tomorrow morning I procrastinated. He was tired, leaving for another long day, and I just could not bring myself to cause him this grief on the way. So I lingered, and lingering took days, for every time that I could summon up the courage, something stayed my hand. Sometimes it was the weary expression in Dad's eyes, sometimes the self-satisfied little smile of Riona challenging me to try it. But the universe has a way of driving things to the limit. Dad came home early on a Friday night, and I knew something was wrong the minute he came through the door. He was pale, his jaw set, his eyes churning. "Safe's short again," he growled, slamming his work bag down on the chair. My stomach dropped. He glared at me and Riona as if he was going to burst. Before I could even get a word out, she interrupted with her dramatics as usual. "Dad, I told you it's her. I don't know why you won't just come clean." She jabbed at me, eyes blazing with feigned indignation, her voice trembling as if on the brink of tears. And then something broke inside me. I couldn't continue doing this, couldn't sit here and let her paint me as the thief while she fleeced him of every dime he had. I pushed away from the table, shaking my hands, and grabbed my phone. "You're lying," I said harshly, my voice louder than I meant it to be, "and I can prove it." The room was silent. Dad's eyes widened, Riona's face went white for an instant before she slapped her familiar mask in place. I reached for the video, pressed play, and set the phone down on the table. The grainy film filled the silence. Her, in the casino parking lot, paying Corin in cash. Dad forward hunched, peering, his face tightening as the lie became apparent to him. Riona's mask slipped. "That's not me," she stammered, but even she didn't sound convinced. "It's blurry, it could be anyone, she probably faked it." But Dad cut her off, his voice low and trembling. "Riona, that's your car. That's you?" The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd ever felt. She tried again, desperate now, insisting I'd set her up, but it was too late. Dad wasn't looking at me anymore with that look of confusion in his eyes. Now he was looking at her, with shock, betrayal, and fury combined on his face. My heart pounding within my chest as I realized this was it, the moment when it all crumbled. The silence in that living room hung like a damp blanket over the three of us. Dad glared at Riona, his hands trembling, his jaw locked, his eyes burning with something I hadn't witnessed in years, plain heartbreak. Riona, for the first time, didn't have her words prepared like arrows ready to be fired. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again, but the falsehoods were now wobbly, flimsy against the solid reality Dad had just seen with his very own eyes. "It was not like that," she panted, her voice cracking, but the damage was done. Dad stood up, the chair scraping against the hardwood, and I remember the crack in his voice as he asked her, "How could you do this to me? To us?" For a second, I thought she was going to finally take responsibility for things, but she wrapped in on herself, crying, tears streaming down her face, still trying to position herself as the victim. "I only did it because I didn't want him to leave me," she wept, meaning Corin, and something fiery rose up inside of my chest, a mix of anger and incredulity. She had placed our father's trust in jeopardy, endangered my own reputation, all for a man who couldn't keep his paws away from a poker table. Dad's head shook slowly, his face white, and I knew in that moment something within him had broken. He stormed out without saying another word, turning away to retreat into his bedroom and shut the door behind him. The two of us left standing by ourselves in the living room under the weight of everything that had not been said coming at us like a rock. Riona wheeled on me then, her tears giving way to rage, her eyes blazing. "You ruined everything," she hissed, coming closer, her fists clenched at her sides. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" My throat closed up, but I refused to step back. For the first time, I looked her dead in the eye and replied, "No, Riona, you did that. You took from him. You tried to kill me for your own safety. Don't hold me responsible for telling the truth." She let loose this bitter laugh, the laugh raw and ugly sounding, and then ripped down the hall to her bedroom and slammed the door so hard the walls trembled. That night I lay awake. I could hear Dad walking back and forth in his room, the sound of his footsteps heavy and uneven, as if every step weighed the burden of betrayal. I wanted to go to him, sit beside him and inform him that all was not lost after all, but I didn't. He had required some space, and I was too raw myself, too spent to even rise. Morning saw the house transformed into a tomb. Dad sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee before him, untouched. His bloodshot eyes had been bloodshot, and, when he eventually looked at me, the exhaustion in them nearly left me breathless. "I don't know what to do with her," he murmured to himself, not to me. "She's my daughter, Elira. She's my girl." I was lost for words, for I knew exactly what he said. Even after all she'd done, she was still his daughter, and love doesn't vanish with betrayal. It just becomes more of a weight, a heavier burden to carry. The threads unraveled that day. Riona pushed us away, or maybe we pushed her away. It was irrelevant. The tension was palpable. Dad moved his safe, changed his locks, even got an account at the bank despite all his distrust. Riona wept, begged, promised to reform, but Dad was no longer trusting. His disillusionment hung over her like a cloud she couldn't dispel. Corin showed up once, pounding on the door and demanding to see her. Dad nearly pushed him off the porch himself, his face reddened with rage I hadn't witnessed in years. Riona screamed at Dad afterwards, calling him controlling and cruel. And when Dad told her to pack up and leave, she did. She slammed the doors, yanking out her suitcases, hopped in Corin's old hunk of junk, and sped off down the road without looking back. The ensuing silence was overwhelming. Dad barely spoke for weeks, just lumbered along doing the chores and sleeping. I tried to fill the quiet, cooking dinner, talking about little things from my job at the bookstore, but it was as if speaking into a void. The house was too quiet without Riona's stomping feet, her giggles, even her fights. I was angry with her for what she'd done, but I grieved the sister I thought I'd had, the one we'd never have again. Months passed, and slowly things evened out. I bonded with Dad in a way I never had before, peer-like, more than parent to child. He apologized to me one evening, his voice gruff and low, for not having believed me, for having been blinded by Riona's lies. I told him I knew, and I did. He had wanted to believe the best of her, and maybe that's what love does. It blinds us until truth smashes through. I'm 21 now, and though only a year has passed, it's like a lifetime ago that night in the sitting room. Riona still phones from time to time, late at night, crying, asking for money, for forgiveness, for rescue. Dad won't take the calls, and when I do, I speak calmly, telling her I can't save her from herself anymore. It's difficult. She's still my sister. I still remember us little girls sitting out on the back porch of our house eating popsicles in the summer, and laughing so hard our bellies hurt. I hold on to those memories because they are the only memory of her that I can still love without hurting. But I've learned something out of everything. Sometimes the people we love the most hurt us the hardest, and sometimes you have to take care of yourself by letting go of them. Dad is still wounded by the betrayal. I can see it in the lines on his face, in the double locking of the doors before he goes to bed. But he also tells me he is proud of me now, proud that I stood up for myself, proud that I did not let her use me as a scapegoat. That means more to me than I can ever possibly tell him. Life is not back to its usual state. We're all marred now, but maybe we're also tougher. We've started saving for school again, putting in overtime at the bookstore, and for the first time ever, I don't feel like I'm living under her shadow anymore. I'm just me. And maybe that is enough.